Okay, without further ado, let me introduce our judges first for Stump the Chump. We have Eric Erickson.
Woo!
Eric Q. And Eric Ingersoll over there. And I'll be the moderator. I'm Eric Hatcher. And our chump is Haas. Haas is a Solr Lucid committer, Apache Software Foundation member, TIG welder, a terrible speller, absolutely terrible.
I actually had that right before.
He swears like a freaking sailor, and he wanted me to make sure he knew that he's really sacrificing because today's his wedding anniversary.
I am here with you and not with my wife, so feel honored.
Okay, here's how Stump the Chump works. We ask the chump a question. He attempts to answer it. Our esteemed panel of judges here will judge Haas's response. And, of course, we're going to try to ridicule Haas along the way here. And we'll just keep going until we run out of time, really. I got a ton of questions emailed to me. We'll certainly not get to all of those. So, and we'd also really encourage you to raise your hand, and we'll bring a microphone to you so that you can, okay, they can come to you. Yep. And interactively discuss the question. If you submitted the question via email and you are present, please also stand up and come to the microphone so that we can be interactive with you about the question, because Haas might want to, ask some XY type problem questions with you about it. All right, ready? You ready, Haas?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, so does FQ run across all documents with Q equals star colon star?
Okay, so FQ is a filter query. For those of you who don't know, it's a way of constraining the set of results you get. The short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, but not for the reason you think. An FQ is actually dealt with very independently most of the time from the main query so that it can be cached as an independent set. So really, regardless of what your query string is, regardless of whether it's star colon star or not, the FQ is going to run across all documents to generate that set so it can be cached and reused across many queries. The caveat to that being that you can put a cache property flag on your FQ when you express it, which says you don't want it to cache. And if you do that, you can also express a weighting to tell it how important it is. And if your weighting is high, or not weighting, your cost, sorry, it's called the cost. If your cost is high enough and the magic threshold is 100, okay, I'm going to say
you're not
100.
allowed to ask questions.
They don't know. The magic threshold is 100, and if your cost is over 100, then it won't. Not only won't it cache it, and not only will it defer it, for anything whose cost is lower, but it'll also defer it past the actual main query. So, if you have a much better query than this, like query for the word monkey, for example, and you have an FQ with a cost above 100, then that FQ will only be evaluated against things that match that main query. But in this case, star colon star, anything, FQ is, no matter what the cost is, anything. The fact that it's matched all the documents, that FQ is going to be evaluated against all of them.
Panel?
Anybody?
Yeah.
Woo!
I'll also add that there's one other point about the cost. If it is 100 or greater, it must also implement the post filter interface before.
Yes, you're right. I forgot that part. That is an important caveat. That wasn't part of the question, so I reserve the right to say that doesn't matter.
Okay, next question.
Oh my Lord.
First of all, I tried to distill the question, the emails that I got down into a one-line question, basically. And Haas is going to digest that, but basically it's asking, can I update a field?
I can say for the first time in a very, very long time that the answer is yes. As of like 4 days ago, I think, on trunk. Was it yesterday, really?
No, this morning.
Was it this? Holy, all right. I just happened to notice the email today, but I'm 4 days behind on my email, so I thought it was from 4 days ago. But there is now a feature in Solr that lets you update a document. And I put update in air quotes because it still has caveats. All things in life have caveats, though, so nobody's allowed to complain. The caveat is all of your fields must be stored, because that's the only way Solr can deal with it. It is entirely server-side, though. You can send a modify type request. I don't remember the syntax, because like I say, it was just committed apparently 6 hours ago. But with a special syntax, you say, I want to modify this document in place. You give it the new values. You can even give it increments. So you can say, like, I want to increase this value on this field, and it will look at the current value and add to it. But you don't have to do it client-side. Solr will handle that with that caveat.
Judges?
How many of you actually knew that that had been committed today?
Yes.
All right. You guys read your mail more often than me.
I would say, too, that...
Oh, yeah. Uh-oh.
So I think they're talking specifically about clustering, and if I'm looking at it fully, they want to be able to just filter on it, but they don't care so much about searching on it. So in theory, in Solr, I think you could implement a value source that also helped do this, right? So you could just update dynamically the value source, and as long as you were making sure that it was done in a good way, then you could, in theory, just be updating on that, and then use an F range to filter based on.
Well, you could,
but he's talking about
they
field
say they want to
collapsing
do
on
field collapsing on it.
Oh, they want to do field collapsing. I didn't see that in the
Yeah.
in the part.
So in field collapsing doesn't work with
So
that.
that's why I distilled it down to can I
Yeah.
update it?
Can I update a field? All right, I'll give you that one then.
All right. I'll take it. Anybody in the audience want to ask a question now before I go on to things I got emailed? Anybody? Anybody? Right here?
Yeah.
Did we
Jump over to
mention
the
there are
app.
prizes?
Oh, yeah. There are prizes.
So once you search on the, using the a term, and once I find the term in the Solr, would I be able to extract the context or the paragraph where that term is existing?
Okay. So the short answer to that question, if I can restate the question, just tell me if I'm wrong or not. Restating the question is, if somebody does a search, and that search consists of some terms which are then matched in a larger bulk text field, can you determine where they matched in that larger field?
And extract the data.
Well, what define? So grab the mic there, dude. Define what you mean by extract the data.
Or a paragraph where that term is
Okay,
found.
what paragraph did it exist in, or what page did it exist in, or what sentence did it exist in?
Yeah, and also be able to find at least 2 sentences or three sentences where that
Absolutely.
term is found. Yeah.
The short answer is yes, and the broader answer is that that's a feature called highlighting. So it's really just a question of how you configure highlighting to work. Highlighting has things called fragmenters, and then there's format. There's a lot of different options related to highlighting, but the key one is picking a good fragmenter, which decides for the snippets that you want to generate, how do you generate them. So if you want to extract out the entire paragraph that a match was found in, you have to index your stuff in such a way that your fragmenter can identify a paragraph. And so there's like fragmenters that work on things like regular expressions. There's some smarter ones people have written that do things like look for sentence boundaries tokens or whatever. So you might have to be creative a little bit in how you index the text to put in like paragraph markers, but then you would have a fragmenter that knows about those paragraph markers. So when it goes to highlight a match, it gives you back the entire paragraph.
I think there's actually 2 answers to this one. What's
I'm
the other
listening.
one?
The other answer to this question?
Well, it's position-based queries.
Well, but he doesn't, I mean, the question is about getting back where it matched.
Right, so position-based queries plus term vectors.
Well, but the term vectors is how the highlighter works. I guess that's true. You could just use the term vectors directly. That's true. There's the term vector component. Okay, I'll grant you. I will grant Grant, or Eric G. I will Eric that he's right. I should have also mentioned that if you know there was a match in a document, you can ask for the term vectors for that document. There's a term vector component that'll give you back all that raw data. It's under the covers what highlighting uses as well to find out where in the document those terms were. But it'll give you back all sorts of positional data. So if, for example, you want to do the highlighting external, if you want your own rendering engine to display highlighting and to find all those matches, you can ask it, well, what are the positions? And it'll tell you like, oh, term 726 in this document was a match. Things like that. Can it extract the paragraph? It doesn't extract the paragraph. It just gives you back term vector information. Yeah, so then you can go look at some raw source data and apply the same sort of logic to say, okay, if I scan ahead to the term that the term vector information returned, that's where it is.
Anybody else? I would also add that the new block join stuff could be used if you wanted to index your documents in a hierarchical fashion.
Right.
You could, you'll get a hit on the paragraph if you indexed it as a paragraph document.
Right, right. I would think, I mean, for the specific question, I would think that was overkill personally.
Yeah, sure.
But that's just me. All right.
All right, excellent. Anybody else?
So just back to filter queries. If I have a filter query on a date field, right, and the
Okay.
filter query uses now, do we have any way of caching that?
Yes.
Smartly? Because now
So
it's changing.
now, I mean, it'll be cached. No. You hang on. We're not done. We're having a conversation here, my man.
I'm out of here.
So the fact that you've used now doesn't mean that it's not going to get cached. The fact that you use now means that it's going to be cached in a very stupid way because it's going to represent now. And now is never going to happen again. So the question you have to ask yourself is, now doesn't happen all the time. Another now happens some other time.
I think you're going to start singing tomorrow.
Tomorrow. I don't actually know anything after that. Does anybody know the next line of tomorrow?
It's always a day away.
It's always a day. Yeah. So you have to decide, what do you care about? Do you care about days? Do you care about minutes? Do you care about years? How much granularity do you actually care about for those date range queries? So a good rule of thumb that I used to use was, and this is in the days before near real-time search when no one actually gave a damn because everyone was just amazed that they could do good search anyway. How often are you doing snapshots and replication? If you're doing snapshots and replication every 15 minutes, you don't need millisecond granularity on your date ranges. You don't need second granularity on your date ranges. That's why we have the date math parser. That's why now, as a mental concept even exists in the date expressions, is so that you can say now rounded to whatever. If you're doing snapshotting or index updates every 5 minutes, round to the nearest minute. Go nuts. And then it'll be cached at least for a minute. It'll be good. So, all right, cool. Okay, so there's no mic over there at the moment. The question was, how do you get now to be the same across all shards? That's a feature that I'm pretty sure is in 3.6. It's definitely in trunk, but it will work automatically when you do a distributed query because what happens is the first node you request, it gets the request, and when it delegates down, it passes metadata to the other shards to tell them what to treat as now. So as long as, even if the system clocks are off, as long as the indexed concept of the linear scale of time is the same, you are okay. So if you send a query at exactly 4 p.m. on the first machine, it will tell all of the other machines that it distributes that request to, I need to know things newer than the abstract moment in time of 4 p.m. So whatever documents were indexed and whatever date values they have in them, if they're after 4 p.m., they'll get returned. That definitely works in trunk, and I'm going to go 90% sure that that was in 3.6. What? Why?
Because the other option, by the way, is to construct your filter query so that with the notion that it's going to be cached in mind. So you do your date rounding on the now. So
isn't that what I said? That's what I told him.
Yeah,
not quite.
I told him round now.
He didn't say. Did you say date?
I said that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm hurt. Well, I'm hurt that you did not.
I've been teaching for 2 days.
That's
I just
true.
got out of a presentation. I'm
You're very
fried,
tired.
So
you're very tired. Have a beer.
I am
Wait a
more
minute.
pathetic
Can we
than
get
you
another
are.
beer for Eric Erickson? His glass is empty. I just noticed. Yeah. Who's back there?
Also, I'll note
Oh,
that
Cassandra. Perfect. Cassandra is the perfect person to be
Make that
bringing
two,
more
please.
beers up. So, Cassandra, grab 4 beers. 1 is for you, and the other 3 are for the panel. Thank you.
I think, by the way, too, that he has now opened himself to questions on physics as with the linear scale of time.
Right.
I think so. I'll just add a technical thing here. Is Eric Erickson actually wrote a pretty great blog entry about now.
Right.
So,
That's true.
all right. Oh, we have another one here.
Wait, where? Oh, middle row, middle section.
Jay.
You got a mic coming to you there, bud. And then I think after this, probably go back to the slides, I'm guessing.
Hi. Okay, so I have a field in each of my documents that is it stores a floating point number between 0 and 1, and I want to use this value to to inform the final score of the search, but I don't want to do it in a additive way or in a multiplicative way.
Okay.
I want to get I want to take the score Lucid gives me, normalize that to something between 1 and 0, and combine these two values so that I can say I want exactly half of the final score to be based on Lucid relevancy and half on my magic number. Okay?
So, but when you say half and half, you mean half and half in an additive fashion after the normalization?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, what was your name, by the way?
Jay.
Jay. Okay. So to repeat the question, to stall for time, what Jay is asking for is he wants to combine a sort of, I consider it an editorially decided score. Each document has, or a pre-computed scoring for the documents that is independent of the actual query. It's just an authoritative, this document is worth X. He wants to combine that with equal weighting with the original raw score that comes from Lucid, but he wants to normalize those raw scores that come from Lucid first. I would need a pen and paper to think about this for a minute, but my gut is saying that actually if you just
You're stumping them, Jay. You're stumping them.
No, my gut is telling me that if you just do the straight multiplicative and your original values are normalized to 0 and 1, that, oh no, you're right. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that doesn't work.
Are you open to writing code?
He asked
or
me this question already. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll write some code.
Oh, we had a slide for it. Oh, okay. The real problem is that I'm tripping over the stage. The real problem is that normalizing Lucid scores is a fundamentally intractable problem. And the reason I say that, to sort of elaborate on it as someone who's thought about it for 10 years, the problem is there's no definitive absolute value of an arbitrary Lucid query, which is why you can't normalize them between 0 and 1. People fake it, and Lucid even used to fake it for you by normalizing for a given query. Like if you query for the word dog, what is the highest scoring document, and then we'll normalize to that. But the problem is then as soon as you normalize, you expect that normalization to apply to other queries. But the absolute highest value of a query for the word dog is different than the absolute highest value for a query against, Apple iPod or something like that, even among the same corpus, let alone when you start thinking about corpuses that evolve over time. So, and that's just because the spectrum of possible queries is infinite, essentially. What you have to do to make that work is you have to constrain the types of queries that you can have. You have to define like a finite set of available queries, and then define a similarity that is bounded so that no matter what query you get, no matter what the term frequencies and IDFs are, it has a theoretical max. And then you can normalize that. So if you do that, and you're willing to put those constraints on yourself, and no one I've ever given this answer to was willing to do this, but if you are, then you write it and implement it as a value source, and you do function query wrapping around your query. And again, if I had a whiteboard or something, I could write this down. But essentially what you're doing is your main query becomes a function query, which is the addition of two function queries, where one of the function queries is your special field, or some function on your special field. And the second thing that you're adding is the query function on your query, where you have then put those constraints implementation. And then wrapped that in your special function that knows how to normalize it.
Right, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
But like I say, there's so many caveats to that that no time I've ever had this conversation with anyone did they ever decide that it was worth doing.
You were not the first person that told me.
What's the actual use case? I mean, what are you trying to accomplish?
Well, the documents are scholarly articles, and the magic number represents number of citations and usage.
But why?
But why half and half? I mean, what's?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because it's
I mean,
nice
the
and clean.
answer is because that's what my boss asked me to do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's. I have had the luxury for the last 8 years of my career of being able to tell my boss to just go to hell when he gives me answers like that, because if there's no definitive, if he can't back it up with a reason why it makes sense, if it's just what somebody decided and put in a contract or a spec, you got to go back and say, but is it practical? Like, does it really make sense? And for the type of use case you're describing, that's exactly where I think a multiplicative boost makes sense.
I'm starting to agree with you.
Yeah,
And
and you can put in a fudge factor, and the best part is tell him the fudge factor is configurable, or the multiplicative factor. Tell him that you're going to set up your config file in such a way that you're going to have all this shit be parameterized. So by default, it multiplies the number of citations by 0.1, and then takes that number and multiplies it by something. You're going to do some cool equation that you've done it and tested and done some benchmarking and some lab testing and decided it works out great. But if they ever want to change it, all those variables can be overridden as Solr params in the URL. And he can experiment all he wants in his browser and tweak it, And if he decides that 0.1 was a bad multiplier, he wants 0.2, boom, done. Like, you can experiment to your heart's content. Because frankly, everybody I've talked to, that customization and configuration winds up being way better for them than some arbitrary formula.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But also I'll add, tell your boss that scoring is now pluggable in 4.0.
That's true. Yeah.
And he can write his very own scoring algorithm if he really values it that much.
Yeah. The only caveat I would say to that is, if your boss is then going to come back and say, great, now write that, you may not actually want to advertise the fact that it's as pluggable as it really is. You might be better off saying, I can do all sorts of cool stuff with function query syntax, because then when he says, great, do that, your job is so much easier. Anyway.
Jay, you get a book for that one. Come on, see me after.
Woo! All right.
All right.
Bonus prizes.
Special bonus prize.
All right. Next one I'll just do from emails here. Let's see what we got. How to achieve field level security. And then there's a little bit of an example there.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk out loud while I read this. We've got a document. The document contains some data. So far, so good. When end users are searching based on the user role, I want to display the search results differently. For US users in a purchasing role, end users are allowed to see the entire document. However, any user in supplier role are searching, I don't want to display cost field in the Solr result page.
And I actually clarified this with the submitter of this question, that it also means that they should not be able to search that field.
Okay.
So per document, field level searching.
Right. So do we know, but this is not correct, what that means at the bottom? Is that just because it doesn't restrict the searching? It only...
I think he's just saying, yeah.
Are you the person who asked the question?
Yes.
Stand up,
Sorry.
come to the mic.
I'm sorry, I should have called him out.
Yeah, no, that's great. Stand up and come to the mic. Okay, so to paraphrase this, no, you're not sitting out. What's your name? Sorry. Into the mic, man, come on.
Venkat.
All right, so to paraphrase your question here, you want your users to be able to search on any field, but you want your your purchasers to search on any field, but your suppliers should never see the price field or be able to search on it, right? Okay, so the easy solution to this is to have two different UIs for your two people, right? Hold on, well, hear me out. Let me talk through it. So you have two different UIs, and those UIs impose the restrictions that you want. So your front end to your customers, your purchasers, in air quotes, they have a search box where they can type in anything and you search on it. Whereas your suppliers have a search box that's more limited. And maybe their search box for your suppliers strips out any range queries they do, or strips out any time they enter the word price or something like that. Now, the caveat to all of that being that I don't know what you're going to do to keep your supplier from going to your purchaser's UI. That's a fundamental, like before you ever get anywhere, I don't know, like if I was a supplier for Amazon, I don't know what Amazon would do to stop me from just going to Amazon's website and doing a search. So I don't know fundamentally how you could solve that problem, but at a theoretical level, you can then take that example of two completely different UIs and you can distill it down to one UI where, depending on a user cookie or whatever, however you know whether they're a supplier or a purchaser, you switch which request handler you use, and your request handler can encode that logic. Now, thinking through what you would have to do to keep people from searching on price, the best thing I could think of would probably be an edismax handler. Two different instances of edismax handler. edismax handler has had a lot of changes happening to it on trunk lately. Jan Hoy, I'm saying his last name right, Hoy? Jan Hoy? Hoydal, that's right. Jan Hoydal. He's been doing a lot of work to make eDismax super configurable to the point where it used to be that eDismax you could type in any field name and it would accept it. Now what he's got is you can say, if someone types in this field name, I want it to be an alias for something else. Or I only want these 5 fields to be the field names people can type in, and if they try to type in any other field name, treat it as a literal. So once you've decided how to identify a purchaser versus a supplier, you can dispatch that query to 2 different request handler configurations on trunk, mind you, this is all trunk, one of which uses the request handler configured to say price is not searchable, and the other configured to say price is fine, no big deal.
Why not use Dismax when you can't type the field name at all?
Well, yeah, you could totally do that, don't get me wrong, but he said he wants his users to be able to do it. Now, right, exactly. So that's a totally good point. So what he said was you could just use Dismax, because Dismax doesn't let you type in any field names. Dismax, everything's a literal, and it's all based on your QF. The issue there is most likely when you say query on price. I've never heard anyone who wants to query on price using literal values. Everybody who has ever talked to me about doing a price search wants it to be a range. So that's the one thing Dismax won't let you do with the main query is input a range. But if your search form is designed with the idea that they pick price by typing in a high, low value, or picking it from a pull down, or doing date faceting. Wow. All right, doing price faceting, with a range boxes or something separate from your main query parameter, then that could totally be done with Dismax using like a filter query. But your configured handler for the suppliers wouldn't support that. You know what I mean? It wouldn't have those input values, right? You're smiling like I'm completely off topic here, which worries me.
No. Basically, as I said, 2 UIs is not allowed.
Right. But like I said, you could have one UI, but somehow you have to identify. Do you deal with cookies? What do you do? How do you identify them?
No, we pull, as I said, ES user specifically. So any user other than ES, if they're logging into the system,
right.
We pull, geographic, nationality, a lot of information behind the scenes.
Right.
So that's the reason, I put those words,
right.
So single UI, like Google, simple text box.
Right.
When they search us, we gather all this.
So how did they tell you they want to search by price? They do price colon and then a range?
No, that's just they say, field name, price, colon, they give the value.
Right, okay. So, but like I say, that can be done with one form, and if your front end has identified them geographically, as being a US user who is in a purchaser role, then you send them to, or you execute their query against a request handler that you have named US role price is okay. And that handler, US role price is okay, uses eDismax configured to say price is an acceptable field to query. And it will happily allow that. But if you don't detect that they're a US user who's in a purchaser role, then you route their query to a different request handler. Same UI, same form, same everything. It's just on the back end, when you go to even the same Solr box, you have 2 different request handler configurations. And that second one, you say eDismax, but with the price field configured to not be allowed. I believe the feature is called user fields, UF. So there's a UF parameter which says these are the list of fields that the user is allowed to specify. So for the people where everything's allowed, you just use UF equals star, which is the default. And for people where it's not allowed, you say UF equals, you might even be able to say minus price, like not price. Or you could say UF equals and list the fields you actually care about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but still it's not sufficient, basically.
Why isn't it sufficient?
Assume, I have there is one document, I have another document where, user is allowed to see the cost information. This is the product item information. I have the purchase item information.
So some documents...
It's per document. That's
per document.
That's the bugaboo there.
Yeah. I don't see that anywhere on this slide.
Yeah, is there anything in the document that tells you what the permissions are, like at index time? You can encode what's allowed to be seen, what the rules are. You can put that in the document?
Yeah, the best guess I can give you then, based on that, is you probably have. You only have 2 of these constraints, right? You have yes or no, right? Either they see everything or they don't. They're not allowed to see it. You don't have like an infinite gradient of security, do you?
Based on who you are, we want to filter the fields in the document.
Right. But who you are, do you define people as being either in bucket A or bucket B, or do you have an infinite number of buckets?
Can I make a shameless plug for LucidWorks 2.1, which has integration with Drool's business rules engine, which would allow you to apply business rules at runtime and apply them to the document as they're coming out?
Apparently you can. Yeah. The real question, though, is if you have a finite set of these buckets, right? If you have the purchaser and non-purchaser buckets, and that's it, and there's some fields and some documents where it's okay and some where it's not and some where it is, you're still just talking about a ×2 problem, right? So you multiply your data ×2. The document where everyone's allowed to see the price, you have a price.
I think you're
everyone.
stumped.
What? No. This is totally
Let's
legitimate.
move on.
But it assumes, you've talked about having these two. The point is you can have the price in two fields. You can have it redundantly in two fields, one that everyone's allowed to search and one that only certain people are allowed to search. If that's what you need, but I'm having a little trouble wrapping my head around the use case.
It's hard
personally.
to explain. I mean, I've worked with Venkat on some of this stuff. It's complicated security stuff.
Other than go use Drools, do you have any other suggestions? No, I'm just saying. I won't.
It seems like you could post-processing, go look at people's permissions, look at the documents you're sending back, and filter on that.
Yeah.
Well, you got to be careful about post-processing because it's still about the query.
Right. I mean, I think it's really just, at that point, it almost becomes just a question of query sanitizing, right? If you're not just dividing this up into two buckets, if you're saying some users cannot query the price field, then who cares what Solr's doing? Just don't let them query the price field. Just stop them before the query string. The post-process, that's why I say, all of this is really just a question of input and output. If you have weird, complicated rules about your input, enforce those before Solr. If you have weird, complicated rules about your output, enforce those after Solr. It's only where that really doesn't make sense. But your example, though, that still seems like something you could do. If you're saying certain users in certain brackets have weird fields, and that's different than a completely separate set of users, which is different than another set of users, and it's all about what they can query on, just put that before you ever send your query to Solr is honestly, I guess, my other suggestion. Anything else? What? All right. Yell if you thought that was a pretty damn good answer.
Input-output
Woo!
answer.
Yeah, see, everybody thought that was a pretty damn good answer.
Hey, who are the judges here?
The court of public opinion has ruled in my favor. You find me tomorrow or something, and you can beat me up about this tomorrow. All right. Are we gonna? Do we want to do more slides, or do we want to do more audience? All right.
Go for it.
After this, we're gonna go back to slides because there's a lot of people who emailed in questions.
It was an answer for that problem. The
way
I understood it is that you have different sets of documents that people can actually query the price on. And the way I would do it is actually do a query parser, and every time the price field is queried, just add a filter on the documents that person is allowed to search.
No, that's good. Yeah. Assuming you have, the way he described the problem, it sounded like it was many fields and it was complicated rules. But if you can articulate those and express them in the query parser.
Document.
Yeah. That kind of gets to what I was describing with eDismax, is you can configure it that way. But if your rules aren't expressible,
but you would do it for the whole field, right?
Yeah.
Not per document. That would allow you to configure that some documents are accessible through price and some aren't.
Right. Yeah, assuming you can encode it when you index the documents. If you can encode all of this type of security information when you index the documents,
you would just add a Boolean filter.
Right. Yeah. No, that works.
Okay, another one from the slides. How do I scale many cores? And I'll let you digest that.
All right. 3 types of search, 3 different schemas, 3 Solr web apps, 3 different. This is like that. I met a man from St. Ives who had 7 wives, and 7 wives had 7. Okay. 212 web apps. Yeah, that's a lot. Except for 1 or 2 indexes, which are about 3 gigs.
You could stand here, Haas, and look down.
I could, but I like participating with the audience. For the record, I did not misspell solution because I have never seen this before.
I copied and pasted, so all mistakes are the original author.
Yeah. Okay, so given all of this, Right. Okay. So all the first paragraph is all just background history because it sounds like they've already switched to doing multi-core in a single web app, right? So I still don't understand why they have 6 web apps. Do you understand? Did you get background on this by any chance?
No.
Okay. So
is the creator of this one?
Yeah. Are you here? Did you? Is the person who asked this question here? Okay. So let's go back. So how do we scale? I'd like to scale horizontally. Does Solr Cloud address this? Has acceptable response time based on the query? Complexity of the query. How do we define the same? Okay, I have to admit, I don't understand question 3 down here. How do we scale, and does Solr Cloud address this? I would say that Solr Cloud does address this from what I understand, although I can't personally say that I've solved this kind of a problem with Solr Cloud. I'm still not clear why the 6 web apps are needed. I would think what you could do pretty easily with this is say, I'm going to set up my Solr Cloud. Solr Cloud has the concept of a config set, which is basically a template that as you spin up new collections, it's what it uses. So you have your 3 different schemas, product, content, assets. So you would load those as 3 config sets, and then you would bring up, if every customer gets one of each of those, then for every customer you bring up 3 new collections in your cloud, and you can distribute it across many shards. So I think Solr Cloud does address this, and that's how I would do it, if that makes sense. How do I scale horizontally based on the index response time? I think that means, I guess that means like as the queries get slow, how do I scale that, I guess? And that one, I don't actually know if there is a way to do that yet. You could certainly add more boxes dynamically. I don't think anybody has written anything that will automatically like parse your logs or parse your response times to say it's slow, we need to scale out. But you can certainly add more replicas pretty much at any time to handle that. That's just you bring them up and you tell them the zookeeper to contact and tell them what collections to be part of. So that should work.
Yep.
Am I missing anything, guys? Well, each of these cores are for individual customers and are independent. So they don't, in other words, the way I interpreted that was they don't need these to be in one core, right? That the customer is not simultaneously searching products and content. Those schemas are disjoint and separate and get individual queries. That was my understanding of that. Now, admittedly, this does mean that you're not going to have like I know people have tried to do like per machine billing. You're not going to necessarily have that if you go with a single cloud model where you have different config sets per customer, different config sets per type, and then you bring up a collection per customer. You're not going to then be able to like keep track of how much resources one customer has drained out of your cloud. That's definitely not something you're going to get when you share cloud or otherwise. You're not going to be able to really distill that information by having multiple cores in a single Solr instance. You really have to do that as separate VMs or separate web apps per user. If that's what you meant by that.
I'm good with what you've said.
I think all I'd add is I don't think the number of cores really matters. It's just throw more hardware at it.
Yeah.
And you could do it with what we have in 3X as well. Solr Cloud solves a lot of the management aspects of it. That's probably, I think, the biggest thing is you want to update one of your schemas. You don't have to go update it 50 times or reload it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm good with that. We have one question here.
Okay, hello. I have a use case which I see as Solr can play a big role in solving. This is from point of view of a user when they do a search and they find a document and the highlighter tells them that, okay, paragraph X has the highlighter feature. When they click on the article, they want to directly go to that page that has that paragraph.
Right.
How do you address that? And
okay.
Think of it as a PDF document.
Sure. What was your name? Sorry.
Kurosh.
Kurosh. Okay. So the question was about, when for a user, from their perspective, they're in a UI, they get a search result back, they get highlighted snippets back telling them like the context, and they want to be able to click on that and have it bring up the specific section of the document where that happened. And the real issue there is not can Solr do it or not. The real issue is when you're linking to a source document, how do you reference it there, right? So in PDF, you're at the whim of the PDF viewer to know, is there a way to specify a page number or a line number to jump to? And some of them do and some of them don't. Likewise, HTML files, for example, there is no, as far as I know, browser standard way to say jump to an arbitrary byte offset in an HTML file or an arbitrary word offset. If you're lucky, you have an anchor tag you could use. So all of that is totally possible using the highlighter and using term vectors and stuff like that, because you can get back, as we talked about in one of those earlier questions, you can get back the snippet from the highlighter. You can get back term vector data about where those terms occur. So you could take that information and whatever rendering engine you're using for the actual document, you could pass that data to that. So if it's a PDF and you're looking at an Acrobat has a way when you reference a file to say highlight a certain word at a certain spot. You could get that info from the term vector component from your original query and embed it in the link that you give to people. I just don't know that you're going to find a standard way to do that for many, many document types.
Count position, I assume,
Right.
in the document, but
Right.
that doesn't factor into pages.
Oh, right, specifically the pages. Okay.
You want to go to that page.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah. I mean, I think at that point you're definitely talking about, sort of Eric alluded to this earlier, like the concept of block join, which is not. I mean, it's being worked on for Solr. Where it's the idea is, sorry, to elaborate on what block join is for those of you who didn't see Martijn's presentation earlier. The idea is that instead of one document, you have one document per page, and then when you query them, it says these documents. If it's an 800-page PDF, you have 800 documents in Solr with one extra document which represents and is the parent of all of them, right? It's being worked on for Solr. It's not done yet. What? Field collapsing is another way to do it, but the problem, the reason why I say block join would help with this, but field collapsing wouldn't necessarily, is because with the block join, you can match on the sub document and the parent document, kind of get all that metadata together. I don't know if you tried to do the grouping. Hold on, let me think that through. No, I guess you could do that, right? Because as long as you have all of the metadata in every document about the overall document, yes, you're right. That would work right now. Can we get a book for this man?
Yes.
Let's get this man a book. So, all right, what was your name? Peter. So Peter just pointed out something that I've totally been glossing over this whole time, which is in Solr right now in 3.6. If you indexed every page of your PDF as a document, but also included the metadata about the name of that PDF and all that, then one way to get the information you want is to do a search across all your documents and then do field collapsing or grouping on the metadata about the PDF. So you would still get one result back per PDF, but it would be the highest scoring page in that PDF. And you would have the metadata about the page number in the PDF and all that. So I think there might be some caveats with that with multi-page results, but I think it would, for the most part, do what you want. You might have to play with some of the grouping options. That's called grouping or field collapsing if you go look at the wiki. And Grant's laughing at me, so what did I do wrong?
No, I think you're good.
This, by the way, is the easiest freaking job right here. My job's pretty hard. Eric's job is also he's got to prep all this stuff. These guys, they just get to drink beer and say, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. I got nothing to add. All right, should we do another slide?
Okay, we'll go to the slide, and then we'll get the. I saw hands up. We'll go to. Let's see. I think we've seen this one a million times before, but we'll toss this one to you. Has something changed? Is it better off now?
Restricting user access. Prior user IDs are not indexed. This requires to index every time a product is subscribed. Bulk query is not scaled. Data max boost and cross restrictions. Can be Solr cloud near R2 to index delete based user subscriptions for each of our cores. So there might be simultaneous requests from many cores for index. Blah, 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 blah. I've already forgotten the beginning of this question.
I hope I distilled it reasonably.
Yeah. So at its basic premise is the idea of well, the specific use case, products and users associated with them, right? That's the specific user IDs. Wait, what is the actual query they're searching for?
So it sounds like they've got users at their UI layer that can only see certain products, and so they're doing that at the UI layer to come up with a list of visible products.
Right. Okay. So they're searching for products, but some users can't see some products because of whatever constraints. So the example here is you could index the list of users as a field on every product, but then if you're constantly dealing with, you've added new users and certain users can see certain products, you're constantly having to re-update that stuff. The near real-time stuff, I think it would help a little bit in the same way that near real-time helps with lots of stuff. You still fundamentally have the problem, though, that if you add a new user who's allowed to see every document, you have to go re-index every document. So I don't know that it really fundamentally helps this problem. The last time I did chump, we had the same question as I recall, and my suggestion then, I don't think has changed, which is whatever your logic is for mapping users to products, implement that in a way that you can get that metadata very quickly and implement it as a post-filter filter query, right? So write a custom query parser that you will only use in your FQ that takes in the user ID as a parameter, and then, right. So they're saying that their UI here has looked up the user ID and gotten back a list of thousands and thousands of product IDs. Instead of doing that and then passing it as an FQ and expecting this massive Boolean query to work, embed that logic in a custom query, which you use as a query parser on your FQ, make it implement post-filter so it's only consulted after you've done your main query. And that's probably the most efficient way to make that work.
Judges?
Post-filter, so it'll be after. So you've already, if your query is only, especially if you've got millions of products and the person has searched something that only matches 1,000 of them, only consult your external authentication system for those 1,000. Eric's got something.
No, I agree, but the thing you have to be aware of when you implement a post filter is your sysadmin comes in and does a star query.
Yeah.
So at some point you might want to consider configuring bailouts and returning partial results so you don't bog your system down.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is this related or is this a new question? Okay.
So, if you group all your org queries and wrap them as an automaton, so you just get all the documents in one single stuff. Is it possible?
You mean if you can implement if you can implement the security part as an automaton?
The product ID will be stored as with memory codec. So and you create maybe not regex, but some kind of union of several automatons that create a single automaton. And
I mean, you could, I guess if you have the right codec, that's actually probably what's going to happen under the covers. But I don't know how that really helps, because the issue here is really expressing what could be thousands of product IDs in the query, because your external security system has said the current user is allowed to see these 1,000 products, right? And then now you've got this massive query that expresses those 1,000 products.
But
whether
running them through an FST will be much faster than doing a Boolean query.
Okay, that's fair, but you're still building an FST on the fly at request time based on the input, right? Because that's the whole point, is this will change.
Yeah.
Your query, you're allowed to see the X thousand products. My query, I'm allowed to see a completely different subset. So that FST is completely, new. I don't know that would really help you in the long run. I mean, if your number of customers is very small so that you could cache those things, then sure. But if your number of customers is that small, you could also probably do it as like an external file field. I've definitely seen that work to say, I've seen people who do like hosted product search, right? One massive catalog, and then they've got 10 companies that they host search for, and each of those companies has a different subset of the massive catalog. So they just do 10 external file fields with a simple, 1 or 0, whether they sell it or not, and do a function query, an F range on that. So that works for like a small scale, and the AST might be probably much more efficient than doing that external file field, but I don't know that it'll help the use case of like many scaling users in that case. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, it's a good thing to think about. That's true. Anything
Question
else?
or answer? Okay.
We had pretty much that problem. The way we solved it is just cache bit sets for the permissions.
Right. But again, that's basically what the external file field thing does. It just doesn't require custom
Yeah,
code.
sure. And,
So.
and then a custom update request processor to just.
So you were just
catch.
toggling the bits as
Yeah,
the updates were
exactly.
happening.
And
Interesting.
then just use a Boolean filter at the end with that.
Yeah,
bit
but like I
set.
say, I'll be honest, I've never thought about having the update processor toggling the bits in that cache, individual bits. Because most of the time, like I say, if you're willing to cache those bit sets per every user, you're probably okay just doing it as an auto warm and regenerating the bit sets because it's a finite set, right? So if you're going to cache, if you're saying like my cache can hold, 512 of these, toggling the bits in all 512 on every update is probably not more efficient than saying when I do a new searcher, I'll regenerate those 512 bit sets.
It was when updating the writes, which is something that didn't happen very often, and even
Right.
then it would be pretty cheap.
Yeah. Like I said, that's that trade-off of how, if you're doing very infrequent writes versus lots of frequent writes, or if you're batching them or not batching them. So yeah, good trade-off. Oh, were we going to do a question back there? All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So we use ASCII field collapsing to collapse a umlaut to A. And in certain languages, we need also field collapsing potentially to convert a umlaut to AE or collapse that equivalent.
Wait, so just to clarify, are you doing field collapsing
I'm
or
sorry,
filtering?
ASCII folding.
Right, so you're doing character folding at
Right.
index time.
Right, at index
okay.
time and search time.
Right.
Both.
But you're saying depending on the language, you want to fold differently.
Yeah, we want to fold differently depending on the language, and specifically we need to also fold a umlaut to AE.
Okay.
Or AE to a umlaut, somehow make those two equivalent for like Swedish, Turkish.
Right, okay. So, well, in general, you can fold, no, you don't, no, you keep the mic till we're done. Yeah, no. You're not off the hook. You don't just get to, rattle off your question and then run and leave me on the spot. We're both, this is a cooperative adventure.
Okay.
All right, so, sorry, what was your name?
I'm David.
David, okay. So David, in general, you can fold pretty much anything to anything. The literal filter named ASCII folding filter, which does exactly what it's talking about. It folds characters that are not ASCII to some nearby ASCII equivalent using some rule set that I don't remember where it originally came from. That is the sort of simplistic way of doing it. The mapping car filter allows you to put in arbitrary mappings, so you can map any set of characters to any other set, and anytime it finds that, it'll just map it. So you could, and that's actually how I think ASCII folding filter is implemented now, if I'm not mistaken, is it's just redone as that. So you could certainly say, I want a umlaut to go to AE. You're still left with the field restriction though, which is you can only have sort of one of those mappings per field. If you want to do it per language, you kind of have to do one field per language, which is 90% of the time what you have to do anyway, because of all the other language-specific stuff you wind up dealing with. The real problem people tend to wind up with when they say, oh, but I just want it to be whatever language the document's in, is what happens at query time. If you're willing to say that at query time it doesn't matter because I'm folding everything down to one base set, then you can probably, I would hope, find some way of structuring your analyzer to make that work. Where you probably run into problems is what you're talking about of your document comes in, you know this document is Swedish, and you know this document is Finnish, and I'm just going to guess that those have two different rules, and you want to apply those rules to normalize to something that later can be, but the rules themselves are different. Is that right?
Yeah. So specifically, ASCII folding does a umlaut to A.
Right.
That's what it does by default.
Right.
But it doesn't deal with AEs in our AE and A umlaut should be equivalent in Swedish. Like if somebody types out AE, we should also map that or collapse that potentially to the same.
But you only want to collapse it like that in your Finnish documents. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the Finnish part's not that hard. I mean, we can
Okay.
with that.
Because I mean, if you're just willing to say I want this rule always applied on this field, yeah, mapping car filter, configure it any way you want, you're golden. If you want to say only for certain documents do I want to do it, and for other documents I don't, that is a lot harder if you need it to be in a single field. If you can do it in 2 separate fields, it's a little easier. My best guess about how you can make this work right now, and it's not something I've played with since Grant committed it like 3 years ago, is called the T filter and the sync filter. So in theory, what you could do, in theory,
I like theories.
yeah, I hate air quotes, but I keep doing them a lot today. In theory, you have a field set up, which we will call text Finnish, and you have another field set up, which we will call text Swedish.
Yep.
And both of these have associated field types, the Finnish field type and the Swedish field type. But the analyzers for these, after they've applied the very language-specific things, then they have a T where they not only go into their field, but they also go into another field. It's sort of like copy field, but it happens mid-analysis chain. Yes. And like I say, if it doesn't work, blame Grant. Yeah, you got a problem with that answer?
That's an awful answer.
Yeah. Yeah, anybody else got anything? Did I miss anything? No? Yeah, you're all like, thank God I did not have to answer that. For those of you who can't see Eric Pugh's face, Eric Pugh is like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not answering these questions.
Can you just do all the variations of the token all at once and then it'll match up at query time? Like whatever the user puts in will get then matched, so it's essentially synonyms?
Yeah, but we need those at a character base, right? So
Well, right, but I mean, so for, whenever you say that you see the umlaut, you do all variations of it as a token at the same position.
Yeah, that's what we like, actually. That'd be great.
So then you just, within the user's query, depending on how they put it in, it would still cover all of them, right?
But how would you do that?
How do you do it? Yeah, that's the question.
Well, I mean, you would have to write your own token filter to do that, right?
Okay.
But that's one of the most common things to do in Lucid and Solr, I guess. So.
Okay.
So I think what Grant's suggesting, tell me if I'm wrong, is you write your own tokenizer that looks at a word and says it behaves like synonym filter in that it injects multiple tokens, but it does that based on what characters it sees and whether those characters match certain rules. Is that fair? Okay, yeah. So like I say, the most straightforward solution to this is to just say, I'm going to come up with a superset of all rules for all languages and hope that they generally work well together. And if they don't, I'll make a choice. Which one is more important to me? Is it more important to me that A with an umlaut matches to AE, or is it more important to me, because keep in mind, I'm speaking mainly about the query time issue. Because even if you could do different things at index time, you still have that problem. If a user comes to my search form and types in a umlaut, what do they mean? Are they Finnish? Are they Swedish? Are they Scandinavian? I don't know.
I think we have a sponsor here too who has language tools who help with these.
I think we have like 4 of them.
So, you might look at some more advanced language processing capabilities too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Hatcher?
We're running down on time, so let me just go to the next one. I think this might be a little bit of a softball here for Haas.
Can I cap the number of documents preventing updates? How would we extend the update handler so it checks on the number of docs in the index before accepting more and maybe return a non-200 code if the core has more than the allowed number?
And this we do in Cloudy.
Yeah. So now I'm trying to remember, having worked on this code, how I implemented it. The simplest way to do it is, that I can think of off the top of my head, is that your update processor on startup just needs to find out how many documents there are in the index right now. When you add documents, it increments its counter, and if it gets to the limit, it starts aborting. The tricky part you run into is deletes. Basically, you have to start, when deletes happen, you have to sort of keep track of the fact that a delete has happened, and when the commit happens, then you say, okay, that delete has been committed, so now I need to go talk to the Solr core and update my info. And that is the rough, off the top of my head way to do it. I think that would cover all the bases.
The submitter is here if you want to ask questions.
Are you here?
Peter.
Come up to the mic. There he is. Where's our mic? Oh, she's back there. Yeah, you're walking away from the mic. You can just stay where you are. That's cool. So, what was your name?
Peter.
Peter. Okay, does that sound like it would work? Have you already tried that?
Haven't tried it yet. I was just wondering if.
Okay.
How hard is it to get the number to write an update? Handler. I guess you should have just wrapped the existing one and.
Yeah. Well, I guess the real question is: are you just talking about total number of documents completely?
For now, yeah. We were just talking about total number of documents.
Okay. Yeah. The number of total documents is relatively easy to get from the. I think it's still on the index reader. I don't know. We move it around a lot, but there's a method called numdocs. Relatively straightforward to your update processor should be able to get it pretty easily. So you could always just be asking that. It's going to be current as of like the last commit though, like I say. So as you add documents, you just need to keep your own counter because the update processor sees all updates. So it'll see an add, it'll see a delete, it'll see a commit. So you'll get those, and the way you write an update processor is you just forward it along the chain, mutating it as you see fit. So if you get something you don't care about, you forward it along the chain. If you get something you do care about, you do whatever you want with it, and then you forward it along the chain.
Okay. So part of the question, which maybe is implicit, is how do I know, essentially per core, what the limit is?
Well,
how do I feed that information into Solr?
Yeah. So update processors can always take configuration that they read from solrconfig.xml. So when you declare your update processor, you declare what class and what initialization parameters it gets. So those just get passed to the init method, and they can be anything you want. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. All right. Anybody?
Well, what return code would you give?
What return code would you give? 406 or 409?
That's a good answer.
409 is conflict. Is 409 conflict? 409 is conflict. So 406 is it's 406. No, 406 isn't gone. 406 is 407's payment required, I think. What? Teapot. No, Teapot is not a 40. No.
Return whatever you want.
406
so
not
tell the user
acceptable.
to stop
406.
indexing stuff.
What? What was the question?
Return whatever you want, and then trap it in your application error and give the
yeah.
right error
You
to
can
the user.
honestly return whatever the hell you want as long as you document it. That's my rule. As long as you document it, return whatever the hell you care about. All right, next.
Anybody else out here?
Do one more from the audience.
We have one back here.
Okay, so say you have a set of documents, set of photos, and they have keywords or tags associated with them. So
Okay.
Your term frequency is always going to be 1 because you only assign a tag to a photo once.
Right, gotcha.
Currently, we're using payloads to get per photo, per keyword scores. So you can say, for this photo, the word house is relevant, but the word dog is not relevant. And for this other photo, it's...
When you say not relevant, you mean it is not tagged with dog at all?
No, it's tagged with dog. It's just somebody has spam tagged it, so you would score it very low.
Okay, got it. So these are not individual user tags. These are cumulative user tags, and you're saying that house is a more important tag because many users have tagged it house, whereas...
Sure.
Okay, got it.
So we're having performance problems with the payloads.
Right.
In this particular case, if you faked it if you use term frequency instead of payload scores by repeating the words by however many times you want the payload score to be, could you get better performance? Yes, no, and why?
Yeah. So the question is, instead of using payloads, if I just keyword spammed my own index, the number of times that I wanted it to count as, would that be better or worse? For some definition of better. I think...
Oh, sorry, to be specific, just in terms of query performance. I know
just
that
in
would
terms
waste
of
a
query
bunch of
performance.
indexing time, but
so I believe, especially in like the 3 series, that it would be a lot more efficient. However, you start getting into the fact that now the scoring model is totally pluggable. You don't even have to use TF-IDF in Lucene 4 and moving on. It's all a question of what your similarity is configured as. So you could probably write a more custom similarity where the payload is more first order and it gets as performant. Because I mean, we're getting to the point nowadays where the term frequency information is just, it's all codec specific, and it's just the fact that the codec says we're going to store it a certain way, we store it a certain way. So if you really had a very specialized case and your payloads are all fixed size and all that, you could probably do something as efficient in your code as the term frequency stuff that you're seeing right now. I don't know that you'll ever get it more efficient. And if you do, please tell us how, and we will start encoding term frequency that way. So What was the question? Can you get it more performant, or is it better than payload?
Can we just get it? Can we get payload? Can we get it to go faster than payloads currently do? Like our
I think you can definitely get it to go faster than payloads currently do. I don't know that you can ever do better than the term frequency stuff. It's just a question of how do you do it, right?
Okay.
Do you shove a lot of keywords in? Do you customize the similarity to treat payloads the same way as term fill? You know.
So if repeating your terms to use term frequency to fake what payloads do is faster, why would it be faster?
Well, like I say, it's not that shoving more terms in is faster. It's that payloads is a generalized mechanism where the payload can be anything, and there is a payload scoring mechanism. Payload. I forget what it's called, the payload scorer. Score payload, right. And it's assuming that there could be multiple term instances, so their payloads might exist on different terms, right? So the generalized use of payload is the idea that you might have any number of terms. Terms might be repeated. The payload might be different on different instances of those terms. So it's a very generalized mechanism for adjusting the score. You're talking about a very constrained use of it, which is why I say your constrained use matches the concept of term frequency exactly, because that's what it is basically, as a term frequency. You could take your payload stuff and say, I'm using payloads in a very constrained way and get the same performance. You would just have to write a bunch of code to do it. So that's why I say, if you overloaded the term frequency stuff, you have less code to do that way.
So we could print out like what essentially is a payload paragraph, which just has the payloads assign the words, and then write our own term frequency module that takes those scores and makes the payloads term frequency instead. Something hacky like that, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, basically you could just write a similarity that knows about all your special cases of payloads. It knows that there's only going to be one instance of a term. It knows that the payload's only going to exist once. It knows that the payload is a number. You know, all of those things you could optimize for to cut out the number of generalizations and delegations that make the payload scoring more complicated. That's really the core of it. The one other thing I'm going to add, though, is don't just shove the term in 100,000 times because you want it to have a weight of 100,000. There's a pre-analyzed field that just got committed to trunk a couple weeks ago where you express a value of term and then a delimiter and then a term frequency and a position. You can add all that metadata literally, like you did it in advance before you ever sent the data to Solr, and you just pass term metadata and it takes it. So use that. Don't write it yourself. But that'll probably be faster than your payloads, and that's probably the minimum amount of work to get where you're going.
Cool. Thanks, Haas.
Yeah.
Hey, Haas, what about if you had 3 fields that was like high, medium, and low value tags, and you just were boosting at index time, assuming you have a finite number of scores?
If you can bucket that stuff, that's always going to be great too. If you can just say it's, important keywords, less important keywords, shitty keywords, and then you just weight those fields and query them in parallel. Yeah. Most of my keywords are pretty shitty.
So my clock says 3 minutes. Do we want to
I don't know.
score with the judges now, or we want to field another one?
One more audience?
One more audience. All right.
One more audience question.
I saw his hand first.
Yep. Wait, whose? Back there? All right. All right. Last question. No pressure, dude. No pressure. Last question.
Okay. Hello. My question is there any implementation, or are you going to implement remote caching in, for instance, memcached or another special cache service in Solr?
Okay, wait, sorry. So can you say that again? I missed the middle part.
Is there implementation, or are you going to implement or develop remote caching?
Remote caching?
Yeah. For instance, in memcached server or for document caching.
Okay, so you're asking, are there any limitations on that, or is anyone planning on doing that, or why aren't we planning on doing that? That kind of question.
If there are any tool, or if there are any.
Or is it? The Solr. Okay, so the first question, the first answer, what was your name?
Levan.
Wow, say it again.
Levan.
Levan. Okay, so the question was about remote caching. The short answer is no, Solr doesn't do it. The slightly longer answer is I don't think anyone's planning on adding it. I have seen people talk about it, but typically what people wind up realizing, or what people who look into it wind up doing, is they either put a cache in front of Solr and they make that distributed, like an HTTP proxy or a memcache, where they're caching the final results of Solr, that's usually what people wind up doing who would start to have this conversation. And the reason they do that is because that's ultimately the level of granularity that they care the most about caching, people have looked into saying that Solr caches, like the filter cache and the query result cache and all that, let's make that a remote cache. You could do it, but there doesn't tend to be a lot of reason to do it because it's just as easy to cache that data locally as it is remotely. The overhead of generating that same data on 2 different servers usually isn't super high. The locality of the information for things like faceting tends to be worthwhile. You could certainly implement it, right? The Solr cache API is relatively generic. You could do it. The caveats you'd have to watch out for are the fact that most information that winds up in a Solr cache is tied to a specific reader or a specific Solr index searcher instance. So you have to think about the fact that like if somebody wants to put a doc set in there, that's all based off of IDs, that's all based off of the current index in the current moment of time. That's not necessarily going to be the same between 2 instances. Even with replication, you know, they might be a few seconds out of sync. Even with sharding, they might be, you know, the requests might be getting handed around. So it's very hard to guarantee that the object you get from that remote cache is going to be usable by both machines. I feel like I had something else I was going to say about that. What else? About why remote caches haven't been implemented yet?
Usually it's the case that, you've got to have enough memory in your system somewhere to have the cache, right?
Yeah.
So oftentimes having it local is beneficial, but then you can use, Memcache or any of those in front of Solr. So that's what we typically see is people use one of those caches in front of Solr, and that's usually helpful if you're in the typical kind of web space queries where most people are asking the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's pretty effective that way. Does that answer your use case?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Because the thing you have to keep in mind is especially because of how these objects are used, like the doc list maybe, you're okay if it's a little out of sync. The doc sets though, those aren't just a list of unique IDs, right? Because you really want it as that doc set as a bit set or now it's a sparse bit set. Because you're going to go intersect that for things like faceting, there can't be any tolerance there. It's got to be exactly what you expect. You really need it to have been generated from the same machine. So why store it remotely? Why bother? Because you really want the same one back. You might as well keep it locally.
Thank you.
You look like you got something to say, man.
No. Time to party.
All right.
If you were an audience member that asked a question, please come up here and give me your email address so that if you are one of the top 3 winners, then Haas will send you a gift card.
That's true. Yeah, the prizes.
But if I don't have your email address, you will not be in the running.
Our judges are deliberating now. The prizes are all Amazon gift cards. We'll email those out. They'll be digital ones. So they're going to talk about this. But if your question winds up winning, please make sure you get Eric your email address so we can get that to you later. So this is, I don't know, this is deliberation time.
Excuse me?
Here we go.
I just have a,
Yeah, hey, sorry.
I just have a quick follow-up question to the separating of a long document, different documents, and having the highlighting of the page.
Right,
that we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
So I was thinking about this, and what do you do if you search for 2 words, and you want word A and word B, and word A is on page 1, and word B is on page 10? Then you would want the highlighting. You want to have a hit on the book.
Right, you're going to get back term vector data for what match, so you have to make that decision. How do you want to link to it? So, yeah. All right. I guess people are dispersing. Are we good? Do we have results? All right, we have winners.
Our judges have decided.
Woo! Who won?
All right. Our 3rd place winner is the ASCII filter query, but I need your email address, so you need to come up and give me your email address.
All right, David Griffin.
David
Was that
Griffin?
David Griffin? David
Okay.
Griffin? Woo! All right, 2nd place?
Our 2nd place is the Boolean query product filter. Let me see if I can find it.
I think that won last year.
And this is...
it's a hard problem.
This is Sajutha, and I think that was just purely emailed, unless he's an attendee,
Woo!
but not here.
All right,
David at Etsy.
and what was our 1st place winner?
And the 1st place winner was Vincat with the field level visibility.
Field level visibility. That was. That stumped me pretty good. That stumped me pretty good. Come on up, man. Woo! Thanks, everybody. We'll see you all over at the party.